I'm here together with Lee, Bryant from Postshift, in regards or in the course of my interview series regarding the state of social collaboration and digital workplace adoption in the UK. Thank you for having this interview with you. But a short introduction for those who don't know you.
So my name is Lee Bryant. I'm one of the principals of Postshift, and Postshift is a company that works at the intersection between social and digital tech and new forms of organization design.
So what is your statement on the adoption of social collaboration and digital work place? So we had this interview already 2 years ago, and when I remember well, at that point you said, well, it's a little bit frustrating for me because we have a long time discussion about this, but there's nothing really moving. Has this changed since then?
Yes, I think it has. I think what we're seeing is we've got two distinct layers now. So you've got a basic layer of enterprise social networks, social collaboration platforms, intranets, and so on. And I think what we've seen at that layer is a bit of a plateauing, and that's what we described 2 years ago, a plateau of adoption, and really the realization, I think, has arrived that without a higher purpose, a higher business purpose, these things are just communication tools. But the second layer that is new and that's existed only, I think, for the last 2 years in the UK and Europe is that there's now a very serious focus on digital transformation and how technology can change the company. So, for example, big trends like the business as a platform, other trends like a service-oriented architecture and allowing partners and customers to go right, very deep into your systems. I think that's really changed the game. And what we want to see now is really a coming together of these two things. There's no point having an ambitious digital transformation vision and strategy and then having a very basic sort of internal collaboration system that's doing nothing of any great value beyond communication. So I think when we mobilize the collaboration platform in service of digital transformation, we have the possibility of involving everybody in the business and creating a truly distributed approach.
But the first approach that you mentioned, which is more about the communications, was always also set up with the objective of bringing a higher performance to the company. Hasn't they reached their goal?
Well, I think the jury's out on that one. I think you can point to some real productivity improvements. If you look at the recent generation with tools like Slack, then I think you can definitely point to an impact in terms of how small teams can operate. But in terms of the underlying platform itself, yes, it's developed new capabilities for the organization. You can do things that were not possible before that collaboration platform was in place, but it's still really within the realm of communication and coordination rather than changing the way that business happens. And I think that's the interesting, the interesting future for that field. Partly that is an issue related to who owns these platforms, because in the early phase they were owned by IT. Latterly, they've been owned by communications functions typically, or maybe a knowledge function if that exists. But I think these need to be much more closely aligned and connected to the C-suite and the people who are actually trying to change the way that business takes place. And then they can be an incredibly powerful resource.
You mentioned Slack. So what is the difference of these new type of platforms at that point? Because there are also talks out there that Slack is also reduced very much only to communications, but you said it's more than that. So what is your stake on this?
Slack is the activity stream that we dreamed of 10 years ago. So the idea of the activity stream was always that it's an integration point where lots of information from different systems flows in, but also you can do stuff with it. And because Slack has all of these integrations with other systems, and you can even build sort of small AI Slack bots, that I think is realizing the potential of what unfortunately just became Yammer and the other tools like Socialcast about 10 years ago. So I think Slack is really game changing. If you go back to the early culture of the internet, we all lived on IRC. And IRC was sort of, text-based and a bit nerdy, but it was brilliant. It connected communities way before, the web and Facebook and so on. And I think Slack is doing that for everybody because it's easy to use, it's fun to use, it's a very simple tool. And so it's giving us that sort of superpower of networks and connectivity at the desktop that we didn't really get from things like Yammer.
But the administration of Slack in an enterprise-wide approach is quite difficult, isn't it?
Well, that's one of those sort of questions. Everything is hard, so let's just buy SharePoint or waste millions of euros on some terrible platform. Slack are working on sort of aggregated teams of team type approaches for the enterprise. They already have an enterprise product where you can have a bit of control over data storage and archives and so on. So I'm pretty sure that's a solution that will get solved. But the thing about Slack is the center of gravity for Slack is the small team. So, you don't need some sort of enterprise version that's one massive Slack chat across the whole organization. All you need is better ways to find teams and to find information that you can share between those teams. So it's a much more sort of small things loosely joined approach rather than a single, one-size-fits-all enterprise platform.
So as a last question, what is your key recommendation on for those projects that want to go from the first generation that you mentioned, so from the purely communication approach to a more digital transformational approach?
I think so in terms of advice, the most simple thing that people can do is to build a sort of change agent network or a guiding coalition of people that represent HR, communications, IT and the business, and explicitly begin having a conversation with the business about what can change, what can be improved, and what new capabilities they can develop as part of their digital transformation efforts. Because I think one of the risks is that top-down digital transformation projects can get lost. They can get a bit sort of stuck in that sort of enterprise, sort of zone where projects tend to fail. So I think they really need to mobilize, all the employees or associates in an organization, first in a conversation about what digital transformation means for them, and then secondly, in the practical act of developing target capabilities and then deciding how they can be created.
Great. Thank you for the interview.
Pleasure.